Hello everyone, welcome to the latest Ethex Cuppa Club. My name is Josh Brewer. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager at Ethex, and I'm joined by a fantastic group of guests today. So I've got Jose Contreras, Director of Wenea South West. Hi Jose.
Hi, morning.
I've got Jake Berniat, Director of Communities for Renewables. Hi Jake.
Hi everyone. Hi.
Peter Bonsall, Director of Sheriffhales Community Energy. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
And Ethex's very own investment manager, Paul Pizzella.
Hello.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Josh.
So just as a little bit of background, so Wenea South West are a purposeful with profits business. They're delivering rapid electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Exeter in the moment, and a project in partnership with the local council there. They're currently issuing an innovative finance IFISA-eligible bond through Ethex to help finance this project. And Sheriffhales Community Energy are a community benefit society. They run an established 3.2 megawatt community-owned solar array. It provides clean energy and also funds local community initiatives in and around Shropshire. They are also issuing an innovative finance IFISA-eligible bond through Ethex, and that's to complete the financing to bring the solar array into full community ownership. So just a little bit of kind of housekeeping to start off with. The aim of the session here is to learn more about what these organisations do, sort of their vision, why they're doing it, why it's so important. It's important to say this isn't a financial promotion. We can't answer any questions about individual circumstances, individual financial circumstances. What we do have though is the opportunity for people to post questions in the chat. So you see there's a chat function. If you just drop a question into there, I'll try and work those into our conversation, or if I can't get them in during the conversation, we'll try and pick them up at the end. So we will be recording the webinar and can upload a copy of the recording. We will be uploading a copy to our YouTube channel and website, so you can watch it later or share it. There'll also be a follow-up email with sort of links to any resources that we might discuss. In terms of timing, I think the session should be no longer than 45 minutes. So finish up about quarter past one, something like that. So at that point, I think it's time to get started. So I think what we'll do to start off with is have both Wenea and Sheriffhales just give a little bit of an overview of the organisations and what they're doing in hoping to achieve through raising finance. And so if I just go over to Jose at Wenea first.
Hello. Hi, thank you, Josh, for the intro. Our project is a project to deploy rapid electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Exeter and environs. Rapid meaning 50 kilowatt plus, which allows you to charge your car in half an hour to an hour, which is a lot better than some of the slower charging infrastructure currently in place. We want to raise £2.1 million to deploy 100 of these chargers. And if you look at the latest figures for electric vehicle sales, it's now 25% of the total as of last month, which is basically in March. More EVs were sold in March than in the entire 2021. Which already shows the level of uptake and significance that mobility transition to electric vehicles is taking. There is a significant lack of charging infrastructure in the Southwest. There's very few chargers, and we want to make sure that with our deployment we fill that gap. At the moment, most people buying an EV and using an EV are people who can afford to pay for an EV, which is more expensive than conventional vehicles, but also who can charge at home, because the current charging infrastructure does not allow somebody to charge outside of their own home. And there is this range anxiety, this charging anxiety with a lot of people that want to transition to EVs, but simply cannot because the infrastructure is not there. And that's what we want to address with our project. It's a project that has a very strong consortium behind it, Devon County Council, Co-Cars, ZPN, Region, these are all local institutions that have supported the project since 2019. We've gone through a very extensive exercise of engaging local stakeholders, making sure that those charges are going in the right places, on street, in places where residents are going to need them. And we've taken, as it's a two to 3 year project before we've actually deployed the first charges. We've deployed 14 of them so far. We're testing them thoroughly, and we will continue to deploy the rest over the course of this year. The project will not stop in Exeter, and we have ambitions to go beyond Exeter. And we believe it's a fantastic template for other UK cities to use as urban rapid electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Not sure, Josh, if you want me to go into a little bit more detail in other aspects, or if this is enough as an intro.
I think that's great as an intro, Jose. Thanks for that. And what we might do is we might get some questions coming in that might dig into a little bit more of the detail, and we'll just wait and see what comes in from the audience. But for the moment, that's great.
Thank you.
Peter, if I move across to you, do you want to just give us a sort of overview on Sheriffhales Community Energy and what you guys are all about?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sheriffhales Community Energy. We are a parish on the eastern side of Shropshire. If any of you want to know our history, we are actually the site of Lilleshall Sports Centre, which is the last place that a successful World Cup winning football team in 1966 trained. So we have a bit of lineage and heritage there. But we sort of we were given a 3.2 megawatt solar farm that was supported by various funding services. And we're just in the process of trying to bring that into full community ownership so we can take control of the output and where the money goes. So far in our parish, which is only 300 dwellings with 750 people in, we've received over the last 4 or 5 years around £150,000, which we've deployed into projects in the village through a registered charity called SACREC. Some of the things we've done is we poured £40,000 into a village hall extension. Why did we do this? Well, in Sheriffhales, we don't have a pub, we don't have a shop, we don't have a post office, and we don't have a bus service. So we are just on the fringes in between Telford and Wrekin and Staffordshire, and somewhat forgotten in the eyes of Shropshire Council. Other projects that we funded are during COVID. We put £8,000, £9,000 into the local school that was needed for training, for software, for support, to keep the school ticking over during the COVID times. We also run a local food support group called SAS, which actually 2 girls out of the village took food to those in need. That ran right the way through the COVID period in 2020 into 2021. And what's come out of that is an embryonic community shop. So those 2 girls are taking sort of the business ethic of what they did during COVID and what we supported, and hopefully they can generate enough money to open a community shop and post office. Other projects that we've funded, just going back to no bus service, we are predominantly agrarian. We do have a lot of elderly people in the parish, and we are funding a taxi service. People have to register for this, we monitor it. If they need to get food or they need to go to visit relatives in hospital in Telford and Wrekin. After the current press, why would you? Anyway, not got the best press at the moment, Telford and Wrekin hospital. But it allows people to get out and about, see, as I say, see doctors, get food, etc. We've also funded lighting around the village hall. The village hall and the village school are on one side, so we've actually funded a lot of lighting because, again, being predominantly agrarian and in a rural area, there's not much street lighting. In fact, we don't have any street lighting in Sheriffhales at all. So when in the winter the mums were dropping off and picking up, it was quite dangerous. So we funded some LED lights for that area. I think that probably about covers what we've done. What do we want to do? There's lots of other projects. We have a road system that is not the best. It's got potholes. We may be looking at that. We also considered running a private wire through to Littleshall Sports Centre, which is only 2 fields away. But up to yet, we've been governed by investors, and the equity raise that we're looking at the moment is to bring the project into full community ownership, so we can sweat the assets and we can also continue to do good work.
Great, thanks for that, Peter. And I think, you know, given the whole context we have at the moment around energy security, it really demonstrates the fact that when there's local ownership of energy, that those benefits can then flow into that local community, and the benefits can stay in that local community. It's really powerful. Jake, did you want to just cover a bit more about the investment itself?
Yeah, I can do that. And some of you may have seen me the last Ethex webinar doing the same for Heart of England Community Energy, and that's because Communities Renewables, our not-for-profit company, is asset manager for Heart of England Community Energy and Sheriffhales Community Energy and a number of other community solar projects around the country. So, as Peter said, Sheriffhales Community Energy owns a 3.2 megawatt solar farm on the edge of the village. It was built in 2016. It's made up of around 12,000 panels, and it generates around 3 million kilowatt hours of green electricity per year. Being built in 2016, it benefits from a feed-in tariff and a minimum guaranteed price for the electricity produced. And it was initially funded by a short-term finance facility from a social investment fund called CORE. And what we're doing now is refinancing that short-term capital through a combination of this bond offer, which is looking to raise 925,000, and a loan from Triodos Bank for 2.75 million, which is being done in parallel. And a critical thing about this offer is the bonds will only be issued if when the Triodos Bank loan reaches completion. There'll be a simultaneous close at the end of it. So it's a bond. The return offered is 4% per year. It's eligible for the Ethex IFISA. Capital will be repaid over 15 years, and that capital repayment is funded out of revenue. So there's no refinance needed down the line. Capital is repaid out of the revenue generated by the solar farm. And the forecast surplus income after operating and finance costs, including repayments to bondholders, for the community is around £1 million over its 25-year life. So the things that Peter's been describing are just a start. With that £1 million over the next 25 years, there's a lot more that Sheriffhales Community Energy can do in their locality. Now, they will also be listed on the Ethex secondary market. So whilst it's a 15-year investment with capital repaid over that period, should you want to get out, there's an opportunity to list them on the secondary market, and Josh can explain how that works.
Thanks, Jake. Yes, I mean, this is in answer to a question that came up earlier about can bonds be sold early. So both Wenea and Sheriffhales will have the potential for buyers of the bonds to list those bonds for sale on a bulletin board on our secondary market, the Ethex secondary market. Now, the key thing to understand here is that a potential seller puts the bond up there, puts the price that they would like, and then potential buyers can get in touch with them via the bulletin board, and if a price is agreed, then Ethex makes that transaction go ahead. I think it's important to recognise that there's no guarantee that you would be able to sell those bonds, and I think anyone investing into either of these projects should view this as an investment for the full term of that project. However, having said that, there is this opportunity to buy and sell on the secondary market that may materialize, but is not a guaranteed thing.
Can I answer
okay.
Mike Willicott's question?
Yes, please go ahead.
So Mike's asked about the returns for community energy investments coming down from, some years ago, the typical rate offered was 6%, it came down to 5%. Now people are raising capital at 3.5% and 4%. And what do we think of that given rising inflation and interest rates? This bond is pitched at 4%. We feel that's still a sufficient return to attract investment. 127,000 has been raised so far. Last time you saw me was in relation to the Heart of England offer, which raised 750, and we had to stop it early. It was the original raise was 1.1 million, but because of rising energy prices, Heart of England would have become overcapitalized if they carried on and raising that full 1.1 million. So we stopped it at 750, but they got there over a period of 2 months, which had Christmas in the middle. So it still seems to be enough to attract investment. Maybe we'll have to push the rate up again at some point with future offers, but I don't think we're there yet. And the project has to be able to afford it.
Can I add to that, gentlemen? That as Sheriffhales Community Energy, this is our third round of refi. The project was actually built by BP Lightsource as an 8.2 megawatt. Due to government changes, the 3.2 was taken away and put in the hands of the community. But the shareholding was always with the original investors, which from Lightsource was a group called Mongoose Energy. This is going back pre-2018. So the project actually had quite a lot of costs through that initial refi. We did go along with it, and when we found out that the junior and senior debt that the project was burdened with was 9 and 7%, which was excessive. We got to a position then where Mongoose were out of the picture. Core came along, replaced that with 5.6 and 3%. But still, as a community project, there were a lot of fees, costs, bank charges, management fees that were taken out of the project. So the 4% at the moment is what we can afford to go the full length of the subsidy and come out the other end. So the answer, I don't see that question, but the answer to that question is we would like to give more, but unfortunately our journey so far with the corporates has been costly. And that's another reason why we want to buy out the 51% shareholding by Core to bring it into full community energy, so we can be in charge of our own destiny.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. And I think, of course, there's always this balance between a fair return to investors and delivering impact through community funds as well. And I think it's important, you know, that you try to strike that balance all the time. Jose, if I could just come across to you. So we've had a question come into the chat, and it's just asking, you know, what is will capital be repaid and interest paid from the EV charging project? So I guess it's asking where the revenue is coming from, and you know, will those repayments be able to be done purely via revenues thrown off by the project, or will there be a refinance requirement at the end of that 10-year period?
So the revenues are generated through the EV charging revenues by the users as they come into the charge with their vehicles. They will pay for each of these charges, and those will be the revenue supporting the project. It's a 10-year bond with an amortizing schedule started in year 4 and gradually amortizing until year 10. We essentially rely on the increasing numbers of EV users locally that will require public charging infrastructure.
Okay. Thanks, Jose. And just another question has come in. Is the bond money fully returnable at term? Yes, that's right. In fact, as I understand, both projects have a kind of sculpted capital return. So it's not all capital return bunched up at the end of the project, but there's actually going to be a sort of sliding scale of capital returns throughout the later parts of both projects. So am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So just going through and looking at the some of the questions. With electricity price rises, and will they be short term or long term as a sub question, does this not mean that income raised through sales of energy will be higher? And does this mean that returns may also rise in line?
I can answer that. So the bond offer is based on what we can be certain about. And what we can be certain about is the power sales agreements we've already locked into. So Sheriffhales Community Energy is locked into fixed price power sales agreements out to 2025. And after 2025, we've used the guaranteed export rate, which comes with the feed-in tariff. So that's what the financial model is based on. If power prices remain higher than the guaranteed export rate, then there will be an upside, which will flow to the community fund, but they could be lower. And the interesting thing at the moment is the long-term view for power prices is still quite low. We haven't yet seen from the market analysts a prediction of a long-term increase in power prices. The question is, how long is this completely crazy situation we're in the moment going to go on for? My gut feel is that there will be some kind of long-term correction, but all we can do with the bond offer is base it on the conservative figures of what we know will happen. We know we'll get our contracted PPAs, and we know we'll get the guaranteed export rate, and that's what the return is based on.
Great, thanks, Jose.
Yeah. From our point of, do you want me to comment on that, Josh?
Yes, please, Jose.
Yeah, from our point of view, our prices will mimic wholesale electricity prices to maintain a margin, an operating margin that we want to respect throughout the term. So as energy prices fluctuate, so will our prices. If you look at some of the major networks in the UK, they've increased their prices recently as a response to the rising electricity prices. So this obviously, the volatility of that market will be reflected in the prices we charge as well.
Okay, thanks. And just a follow-up question, Jose, actually, a question has come in. So how does cash flow from someone who uses the meters through to the host installer who's actually paying for that electricity? How does that sort of process work?
The two payment options, you have contactless payment, which basically works through a debit card or credit card on the meters, and that flows through a payment gateway mechanism into our account, from the client's account into our account. And you have an app, Wenea app, you can pay through which you register as a user, and that gives you many more functionalities through the app. And one of them is obviously the payment mechanism.
Okay, thank you. I suppose just a slightly more general question to both of you, or both the organisations, is why did you decide to raise finance from the crowd? Why when looking at this piece of your financing, why did you think actually we want to take that out to a retail audience? And Jake, should I start with you on that one?
I think it's two reasons. Most important is a key part of the community energy business model is to democratize how the energy system is owned and financed, and to the extent that the investors are local, it's a benefit to the local economy. It's money coming back into the local economy rather than going to outside investors. But even with people from across the country, it's cutting out the middleman, and rather than the returns ending up with people ultimately via their pension fund or other forms of investment, is going directly to those individuals and gives them some direct participation in a project. That's the main reason.
Okay, thanks. And Jose?
Yeah, Well, actually, I would have a very similar response. This infrastructure that we're placing in Exeter is going to be used by local residents. It's going to help the transition to electric mobility at an individual level, and to the extent that local residents, but also people outside of Exeter can participate, then I think that's a very positive outcome.
Great, thank you. As I mentioned at the start, both of these investments are eligible to be held inside an innovative finance ISA. Paul, do you want to just give a little bit of background on the IFISA for those that aren't aware of it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so the IFISA, or the Innovative Finance ISA, so it's basically an ISA wrapper. So the same tax benefits that you would get with an ordinary stocks and shares ISA, or indeed a cash ISA. And of course, we're into the new tax year, the 7th of April. So we're into the new ISA allowance season. And just like your ordinary stocks and shares ISA, there is a £20,000 innovative finance ISA allowance, and that's all part of your overall ISA allowance. So for instance, if you invested in this new tax year £10,000 in your stocks and shares ISA, that would leave a £10,000 allowance to invest in your IFISA. And if you're investing, it's attractive in the sense that you don't pay income tax or on interest or dividends. And we have set these investments up so they're eligible for IFISAs via our platform. So you can take advantage of this year's IFISA allowance, or indeed, if you've got cash balances from previous years, you can transfer those across to an innovative finance ISA, and that functionality is all built into the Ethex platform.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Jose, I can see you've answered the question on VAT, but Jake, there's one that's come across to you, the chances of the community energy bill getting through Parliament, and how might this affect future community energy projects?
I can't comment on its chances of getting through. So
yeah, it's a tough question, that.
what the local energy bill is proposing, it's a very simple aspirational bill that says communities should be able to generate and consume their own energy and have some local benefit from doing that, i.e. communities should get cheap electricity from their own community's wind or solar farm. I've stood in village halls for 10 years talking about community energy and about community funds and community ownership and democratic control and investment returns, but the thing that most people want is cheap electricity. And that's the thing that in our current energy market, it's really hard to do. So I definitely support the aspiration of the bill. Implementing it or coming up with the details behind it is actually quite complicated, but the first step is getting the bill passed. And it's interesting watching this debate that's been going on in the cabinet about whether or not onshore wind should be reintroduced in England in the context of a energy crisis that's pushing people into poverty and a war, and the answer seems probably not. But the one caveat to that is we'll explore a limited number of community-owned wind turbines where they can provide the local community with cheap electricity. So let's see where that one goes.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And I think you touched on something there, that if you look at both of these projects and then you look at the wider context of, the awful events in Ukraine, as I say, dire warnings and the latest report from the Intergovernment Panel on climate change and the cost of living crisis that's driven by energy costs. These two transitions, really, one, a transition to renewable energy and preferably community-owned renewable energy, and the electrification of in the case of Wenea Transport, but we'll look at the electrification of heat as well. I think it will be a big thing that's coming up as we try and transition away from a fossil fuel economy. So I guess it's just thinking about both of your organizations. How do you see the outlook at the moment? Do you feel it's quite positive, you think, when you're looking forward, or how are you feeling? And also, as a kind of follow-up question, what help from government would you like? What would be the thing that government could do that could actually ease this transition and make it more possible? And Jose, if I start with you there.
Yeah, sure. So this transition to EV mobility has, if it's not done properly, it can turn to be a very exclusive process where only people who can afford to buy an EV or charge at home will eventually be able to transition to that EV mobility. We've seen it in previous instances where people without access to the electricity grid network end up paying more per kilowatt hour for their electricity. And we will see it with this transition to electric mobility, with people without access to the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, or the vehicles will end up paying more for their mobility, which will eventually turn this whole process into a very exclusive process. If we want to prevent that, we need easily accessible public charging infrastructure, and we also need an EV sharing model, which is what we're bringing in with co-cars, which allows people without an EV to use an EV by paying by the hour. So with these two elements, widespread charging infrastructure and accessibility to shared EVs, you can turn this whole transition into something a lot more inclusive. And we would love to see from the government steps to help in both of those elements, getting more infrastructure out there and also getting more access to electric vehicles.
Great. Thanks, Jose. And Jake and Peter, if I go across to you.
Yeah, I was just going to interject there. I've been involved in this solar project since it was connected in 2016, and all through that period, we've been looking at the possibility of creating a co-op within the Sheriffhales parish, where we could bring cheaper electricity rates to that membership. It ain't easy. I mean, what can government do? It can't be difficult. We've got a lot of dwellings and businesses very, within miles of the project. How can we sleeve what we produce to give benefit to our local parishioners? It's not easy, and I think once we complete this refi, it's something that's on the agenda that we can look at. Because I go back to what I said earlier, we are rural, we've got predominantly elderly population, fuel poverty is something we're looking at. We helped a lot of people through COVID, and we intend to help a lot of people through these times of high prices. But I'm an engineer, we're producing electricity, we're consuming electricity, there must be a link between the two.
Yeah, thanks. Jake, do you have anything you want to add into that at all?
Well, the big picture is we have an energy crisis because whilst the country is generating nearly half its electricity needs from renewable and low carbon sources, the energy price is still set by fossil fuels. And over time, an energy system based on renewable sources will bring down and stabilize the cost of energy. Community energy does that in a way on a micro level. So a community solar project like Sheriffhales, when the electricity price goes up, it gets a higher price for the electricity produced, and that makes a higher surplus for its community fund, which goes into helping people in the local community, including energy efficiency and tackling fuel poverty. So at a kind of micro level, it demonstrates what the system will do over time at a macro level. But we need to be using this energy crisis to fast track that transition to a renewables-based energy system, countrywide retrofit. And today's announcement doesn't quite go there. It doesn't jump at it. I think it's crazy because wind and solar can generate power at 4 to 6 pence per kilowatt, 4 pence for bigger projects, 6 pence for smaller projects, compared to nuclear at 9 pence. The current wholesale energy price is between 15 and 45 pence. So we've got the technology, it can do it now, it can do it subsidy free. A countrywide retrofit would be a big build back better, levelling up agenda that would benefit everyone, create jobs, but the government isn't jumping on it.
Can I just answer? There's a question come up about battery storage.
Yep.
All of these projects we have on the agenda post refi. Where the project is situated, we are 2 fields, probably less than a mile away from the busy A5. And pleased to meet you, Jose. And maybe after this event, we can discuss whether there's a possibility in diverting some of the energy we produce down to the A5 to put an EV charging station. Because I forgot to add to my list. Actually, we haven't got a pub, no shop, no post office. We haven't got a filling station either. So maybe we could have an EV charging station run off the community-owned energy. Why not?
Yeah, definitely.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, Jake, I'd just like to echo what you were saying there. It just feels like a massive missed opportunity in terms of the government's energy policy and you know, the move to nuclear, which will only start to, you know, these projects come online in 5-10 years or something like that. Whereas, you know, you can bring, certainly my understanding on wind, you can bring a wind project on pretty quickly, actually. So yeah, it's a shame. Just talking about that sort of business models, non-fit solar projects, and what's the sort of payback? Well, I suppose more of a broader question is what the business model is looking like in terms of viability around non-fit solar at the moment.
It's there. The big challenge is capacity in the grid, but there is definitely another land rush on for solar and wind in England. In Wales and Scotland. You can't do it in England. Renewables wind and solar doesn't need a subsidy anymore. As I said, it can generate at 5 to 6 pence per 4 to 6p per kilowatt.
Yeah, great, thank you. And just quick question has come in around what circumstances would prevent expected bond interest being paid. Jake, I might start with you on that one again, if that's okay.
So as I said, the financial projections are based on effectively a contracted power price for the next 15 years, and the intention is to repay the bonds within that 15-year period. So we have certainty of the price we can sell the power for. So it would be the problems, the potential risks described in the risk section, some catastrophic uninsured failure, change in irradiance, long-term technical problem. Rather, the bond offer is not based on a projection of future power prices. It's based on our contracted power price and the guaranteed FIS export rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And likewise, when the bank loan closes, the interest rate on the bank loan will be fixed, but the bonds won't be issued until the bank loan has closed.
Okay, thank you. And Jose, on your side?
So we've captured our risks as well in our bond offer document, but fundamentally it would be a lack of demand for the charging in our chargers. So no users using the chargers to charge their vehicles. There's an element of technology risk as well. These chargers may not function properly, in which case, there are insurance and expertise behind it to mitigate that or replace the chargers where they're not operating properly. And yeah, I would highlight those two as the main risks. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you both of you. Well, it looks like we've got through all the questions there that have come in from the crowd. I guess just to sort of finish off, maybe if I just have like 1 minute from each of you and just saying, what you're, how you would hope to see your organisation in 5 years' time. You know, what would that look like? Jose?
I was going to say I'm quite happy to do that, because going back to what I said earlier, we've been under corporate interest, shall we call it, control for the last 5 years, which hasn't been a pleasant experience. And the next 5 years, we are hoping to be able to run this project as a true community energy project, and not a cash cow for investment fees, bank fees, etc., 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 due diligence fees, technical fees, and so it goes on. You know, we're looking forward to being able to, as a parish, the board of the CBS is predominantly from the parish or adjoining parishes. The charity that distributes the funds to worthy projects are all parishioners. We have a constant stream of, obviously, demands for funding of projects within the parish. And in our current situation with issues over fuel poverty, county councils cutting back, it makes sense, and we're looking forward in the next 5 years to maybe looking at an EV charging station with battery storage, maybe putting a private wire into Lilleshall to generate better income, but also making a difference to the parishioners that have to look at the project day in, day out. So I think in 5 years' time, I would like to see this actively producing a better revenue stream than it is now, that it's been allowed to do up to this date, and the profits going to the people, to the community, to make their lives better.
Thanks, Peter. Jose?
Actually, we would have a very similar ambition in the sense of putting out the infrastructure which is sorely needed at the moment for electric vehicle charging, and making it work through local residents, both usage and financing. So this bond helps exactly in that ambition to make sure that the infrastructure is being both used and financed by individuals and local residents, and it essentially flows back into the community. As I mentioned before, the transition to EV mobility has a big danger of turning into a very exclusive process, benefiting a very small segment of the population who can both afford an EV and have their own private driveways to charge it. And through this program, we're hoping to mitigate that exclusivity that is unfortunately gonna come around if we don't do something about it.
Thanks, Jose. Jake, did you want to add anything at the end there? No. Okay. I mean, I think, you know, just thinking about where we are at the moment and questions about energy security and devastating climate change, both your organisations are providing solutions to these problems, and through delivering those solutions, you know, you are hoping to solve them, but also deliver a more equitable world. And I think, if I maybe turn this and think about Ethex as well, that what we want to do is we want to build a movement of ordinary people who are financing organisations like yours to kind of deliver that change. So that would be my hope as well. Okay, well, we've actually run out of time, and that just finishes up with saying thank you to everyone. So I'd like to say thank you to Paul, thank you, Jake, thank you, Peter, thank you, Jose. It was a great session. Thank you very much. As I say, we will be sending out a recording. We will be putting a recording of this up on the website. We'll send out a follow-up email. But I just like to say thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
You, Peter, Jake. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool. Bye-bye.